Welcome.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Oops. I think we're recording. Welcome, everybody. Just give a minute to let everybody in. Okay, I'm gonna. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Gonna make sure we got everybody in now. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Beyond Lawns, How to Advocate for Native Plants and Local Ordinances and HOA Rules. This webinar is sponsored by the Hoosier Environmental Council in partnership with the Indiana Native Plant Society. There will be links to both organizations in the chat, and I'd encourage you to spend some time looking around on both of those great websites because they both have a wealth of information on them. My name is Jenny Jenkins, and I'm the Senior Special Projects Manager at the Hoosier Environmental Council. If you aren't already familiar with the Hoosier Environmental Council, we're a nonprofit organization based in Indianapolis, but we work all over the state on many different environmental issues. We've been around for 40 years and work year-round as advocates for the environment in Indiana. We do a lot of environmental advocacy in the Indiana State House during legislative sessions. And we keep the public informed on any environmentally related legislation that's kind of under consideration during those sessions, whether they're positive or negative for the environment. We are also actively working on all kinds of issues from sustainable agriculture to clean energy to wetlands to environmental justice and many, many more. So I hope you'll check out our website and follow us on social media if you don't already. I'm excited to be here tonight to learn more about one of my personal favorite topics, which is native plants of Indiana. Based on the response to this webinar, it seems that many of you are also inspired to spread the word about native plants and using native plants when you live, whether you live in a neighborhood and deal with an HOA, or whether you live in a city or town that has restrictive ordinances. Just 1 second here. Oops, excuse me. There we go. Okay, before we begin, I would like to thank some of our green businesses tonight. As you can see, we have a number of businesses in Indiana who have demonstrated their own commitment to environmental sustainability, and they are great supporters of the Hoosier Environmental Council. Because of the support and the support of individual contributions, we can provide webinars for free like these. So tonight, we are also going to share a link to a short survey about this webinar, and we hope that you will take just a few minutes to fill out the survey after we're finished to help us provide you with the best webinars possible. So I will share that link a little bit later. And then lastly, we'll be doing a short Q&A after the presentations tonight. So please feel free to ask questions of the panelists in the Q&A section on your screens, and we'll get to as many of those as possible during the webinar. So feel free to ask those anytime. All right, so without further ado, let me introduce our first presenter tonight. Claire Lane is the urban conservationist at the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District and leader of the Hamilton County Invasives Partnership. Claire provides technical assistance to private landowners and HOAs who are seeking to address natural resources concerns via conservation and sustainability. So I will hand it over to Claire.
Thanks. You guys see my screen okay?
Awesome. Yes, looks perfect.
Thanks. All right. Well, yeah, I'm happy to be here with you tonight talking about going native in an HOA. Through my role with the Soil and Water Conservation District in Hamilton County, I work a lot with private landowners, public property owners too, public property, but a lot of homeowners associations, people who live in HOAs, and also directly with those HOAs, either a member of a committee or the board, or a management agency, to help people address natural resource concerns through conservation. So we'll talk a little bit briefly about what some of those concerns are, and then some of the strategies I help people with to encourage them or help make going native a little easier. So, what does going native in an HOA look like? It could be different things, whether it's, private property or one of the common areas. So a lot of the things we help with on private property would just be integrating natives into the landscaping, reducing the amount of turf grass, and transitioning that to something else like native plants, native tree plantings, plantings within the tree lawn, or maybe you've heard it called the hell strip between the sidewalk and the road. In common areas, we help a lot with pond edge issues for detention ponds, so planting natives along the pond edge. A lot of HOAs have really expansive turf grass areas that are really expensive to maintain, so transitioning those to something that's better for the environment, so like a meadow or something like that, and prairie. Reforesting some of those common areas to create woodlands or forests, native landscaping, maybe around like within a common area or around a clubhouse, and then also signage landscaping. So like those big entry signs, either in the median or on the side where you enter into a community. So with going native in an HOA, a lot of people might not realize that there are already things that your HOA and your HOA dues might be paying for by not implementing natives. So a couple of those things quickly that you might not think about, particularly people that don't live right on a pond in an HOA, is the algae treatment that goes on in the pond. That algae is coming from fertilizers and things that get put on lawns all throughout your HOA and all throughout your community. It drains down into the stormwater infrastructure and then goes to that detention pond where all those fertilizers just allow that algae to flourish and grow. So paying a lot of money to treat that water, maybe even every week, all throughout the summer, to reduce algae. Pond erosion mitigation. We see a lot of erosion on the edge of these detention ponds. That can be very expensive to remediate if it's not properly maintained, especially if it kind of like gets away from the HOA and the problem is really severe before it's dealt with. Mowing those expansive turf grass areas, it's really expensive to mow those, at least 26 times a year, every single week, particularly when you have acres and acres of common area turf grass. And then replacing poorly planted or poorly maintained trees throughout the HOA, either in the common areas or maybe you might be responsible for the tree lawn or something like that. So those are all things that are adding into the bottom line for your HOA every year. Oh, some others as well. You're paying with things that might be not as tangible. So things like poor air quality from all of that mowing, noise pollution from all the maintenance on those turf grass areas and non-native landscape areas, potentially reduced recreation, either from a retention pond being in bad shape or missing out on opportunities like having really pleasant walking spaces or a wooded area in your HOA that can add to property values. A ton of money spent on those annuals that are placed at the entranceway of HOAs each year. And then also money or issues associated with nuisance Canada geese that are common problems in big turf grass areas and detention ponds. So to make the change in your HOA can be complicated and overwhelming, but it's definitely possible. And sometimes it just takes a lot of patience. So some strategies that I help people with a lot, definitely start with education. And we're going to get a little further into some of those actual strategies, but educating the board, educating the management company, sometimes educating friends and neighbors. Once you have a plan put together of what you're trying to implement, providing examples of either HOAs that have done something similar, Or maybe something that's a little more accessible is where you could direct people in your local community to see something similar, ideally in another HOA. But maybe it's a planting at a park or a wooded area, some kind of publicly accessible place that you can send people to say, this is what we're trying to do. You can look at it here. You can go look at it at different points in the year to see what it looks like. Starting small is really important. Even projects where I work with people where they're really excited and already have buy-in from the community, it's easy to bite off more than you can chew. And that leads to increased maintenance costs on the back end. And when maintenance kind of just gets away from either, a management company or individuals, if they're maintaining it, often we see those projects getting ripped back out and put back into turf grass whenever we start with something that's too broad. So it's always easier to start with something that's a little bit smaller, kind of use it as your case study to show the community what's possible and what it looks like. And then once they start to love it, expand out from there. Definitely building a community for support. The neighbors that you do have that are on board, it's really important to kind of have each other's backs, because unfortunately a lot of those people that aren't necessarily supportive can be pretty vocal. So it's important that you have your community that is vocal as well and support. Compromise is another big thing. Whenever you get into that kind of like trying to sell what you're trying to do. And I find it's really important that we just truly listen to the opponents or people that are unsure first, because a lot of people, particularly in these HOAs, maybe just don't really have a relationship with nature. They don't understand the benefits as far as water quality or pollinators or the assets to the community, because that's not a relationship that they value in their lives day to day. They haven't spent time in natural areas. It's not someplace they feel comfortable. So I think really listening to what the concerns are is really helpful, because, you can listen to, is it property values? Are people scared of wildlife and coyotes or rats, bees, tall grass and crime, all of these things, we hear. If you really take the time to understand what the concerns are, then you can step back and kind of formulate your plan to address those through all of the information that's really easily accessible. And then if it comes down to it, if you're not already on the board and, trying to fight from within, a lot of people end up either joining the board or joining a landscape committee, so that they can start to really like push things forward or keep bringing ideas up, or maybe have a little bit more authority whenever it comes to talking about some of these things. So I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit more about the education side of things, because it really is the most important. So when we work with a homeowner or an HOA, we try to help them build a plan, or their education plan of the strategies they're going to use. And the number one thing that can really sell these projects to people that aren't on board, just from the ecological side, is the cost savings that you can see. So going out and identifying some of those costs that your HOA is already paying out each year. So mowing costs per acre, pond treatment costs, maybe if you'd be looking at dredging in the nearish future, that number from dredging is terrifying, honestly, for most people, because it's so huge. Erosion issues that you have, tree planting issues or tree maintenance issues, how much it costs to replace those trees. People are often really shocked by that budget that's dedicated to planting those annuals at HOA signage. So identifying those numbers is a great first step, because there are other resources online or that we or another organization local to you probably has, that can help convey some of the actual cost savings. So this is an HOA in Hamilton County, Ridgefield, which it's probably been 12, 13 maybe even closer to 15 years now, since they took some areas out of turf grass and repurposed them to a native meadow and did a native planting around their pond. They were able to utilize some cost share from the Soil and Water Conservation District and also the Department of Natural Resources to offset the costs of that installation. But that project paid for itself in the first year for them due to the reduced maintenance costs. So you can see there's some numbers on the right that outlines their actual ongoing maintenance costs for the project versus what they were paying for turf grass mowing, which was $1,500 an acre per year. And that's, I think, maybe like a 2015 number. Since they weren't maintaining those turf grass areas, they were saving $5,000 a year in maintenance expenses. So almost $50,000 a year over the 9-year period at this point that they had been, since they had installed the project. So that's a pretty significant savings. And, especially when in the face of, constant increases in HOA dues and things like that, pointing out those cost savings, really goes a long way. Other things that are really important would be signage, temporary and permanent signage. So I have some examples there for you of some what I would consider fairly permanent signage. So some signs that you can get, like that yellow one is one that we sell at our office. You've got the certified wildlife habitat through the Wildlife Federation. That bottom right one is just one in a local park in Fishers. And then the We Grow Indiana Native sign, which is something you can get your native garden or native landscaping certified through the Indiana Native Plant Society and buy a sign. Anything that shows that the planting or the project is intentional and has value is really, really important. We have found that kind of preemptive signage is really effective as well. So anytime there's going to be a change, maybe it's removing invasive species or burning bush, that are next to the pool or something like that. Having either, signage you make or just some temporary corrugated plastic signs that you can get from Staples or any office store that says, this is invasive, it's going to be replaced with a native species. Or if you're coming in to do a pond edge planting or a turf to prairie conversion, they're probably going to have to spray an herbicide on the grass. So that's pretty frightening to people who don't know what's going on. They're not up on the latest in the community and they see a bunch of dead grass in the middle of the summer or something like that. So we can put signage out ahead of time that says restoration in progress. This area is being transitioned to native plants for pollinators, things like that show that something intentional is happening here. And then once you get kind of the project really rolling, then you can shift to that temporary or permanent signage. And then of course, always the don't mow signs, all of that, because it's really easy for overexcited lawn management companies to, get a little too close into something they shouldn't be mowing. Utilizing Nextdoor and Facebook groups for your community is really important. Maybe that's just to kind of find your community that I talked about earlier, those other people that are also interested in native plants, or maybe using natives in the landscape, but also just to communicate the plan of what the HOA or what you as an individual are trying to do. Trying to sell it to people, sharing information about the cost savings, sharing information about the timeline of the project and what people can expect at each stage, knowing that, if you're doing a native planting from seed, it's probably going to take a few years before it looks really great. So making sure that people really understand this is what you can expect it to look like in the first year, the second year, is really, really important. And then offering those periodic updates, whether that is mowing or seasonal maintenance that's going to be happening on a project, especially those first few years, if maybe like your native planting from seed has to be mowed down, that can be scary to people too, that, oh no, they're out there mowing down the flowers. So making sure people understand ahead of time what's going to be happening. And then once things really get going, to keep people engaged with the project and see its value, spotlighting different aspects of the project, like again, how much money it's saving is a great one. But what's in bloom, talk a little bit about post a picture of the penstemon and talk a little bit about penstemon and what pollinators it attracts. Pollinators that you saw or a bird that you saw in the community. And trying to solicit kind of a conversation and get people to engage with that kind of content or information online. It really builds a sense of community about these projects, that people feel like they're invested in them and it's something that they should be proud of as part of their community. So what we're really trying to do here is just change the perception of what belongs in our communities, right? Shifting our neighborhood norms. And that's really hard because it's scary for people to do something new. But it's definitely possible, and we see it all the time. This is like I said, a tree lawn, or the hell strip planted with native plants in Carmel, I believe. And this is at the entrance of this HOA neighborhood. So it's a really prominent location. So ways that we can increase the acceptance of using natives in our own yards is to make sure that we're doing all of the things right. A lot of people, might think natives, that's weeds, and you don't want that. It's unruly. It, will lower my property values and things like that. So all of these different elements of care are really important. Anything that makes the project look intentional. So that signage, fencing, bird baths, a birdhouse, things that show that this is being maintained. Getting those certifications, if you can, gives a little bit more, like authority to the practice. And even in some communities, you can get your project certified or approved through the city to be able to exempt you from tall grass ordinances. Again, starting small so that maintenance doesn't get out ahead of you is really important, because, that's what really gives natives a bad name whenever they're not maintained properly. And could become like unsightly in a formal landscape. And then of course, all the design elements you would typically use in a landscape design that's not natives, limiting the heights, making sure you have diverse bloom periods, using mulch as one of those ways to show that an area is intentional, using really defined edges, whether that's a mowed turf grass edge or, rocks or pavers or something like that. And a lot of these things, they are really hard, and you might have some limitations for HOA bylaws or ordinances or local tall grass ordinances, planting lists that you have to go off and things like that. And I think Brooke and Liz are going to talk a little bit more how you can effectively advocate for those things as well, because they are really important, that our decision makers are hearing from us about what's important to us in our home landscape so that we can shift that perception. But at the end of the day, you can't please everyone. An example, I'm going to go back here a few slides. This image on the right here, it is a common area in an HOA in Westfield. So we worked with this HOA and DNR quite a few years ago for them to do this native planting. It's established now, it's been maintained. Elements of care, particularly in those common areas, you can see that it has 1 or 2 mowers width of turf grass along the edge of that path. So that keeps things clear, things aren't drooping over the path. People that might be, uncomfortable in more of a natural setting can have a nice line of sight to move through there, but still enjoy the pollinators. I took that picture on a site visit where we were called out there because one person in the HOA was making a really big fuss about it because they just didn't like it. And to me, I met someone from DNR out there and we were like, wow, it looks great. Like, it's really coming in nicely. It's exactly what we'd want to see. But there's still going to be people that's not comfortable for them. That's not what they like. That's not the formal landscape they desire. We can't please everyone, but we can take all of these strategies to try to do the best we can to start small, start using those natives, and hopefully start shifting that perception of what's really acceptable in our formal landscape areas. So finally, I just wanted to share some resources. We have a page on our website that has a ton of links to some different educational resources. And from a webinar we did a couple years ago with the city of Zionsville. So if you scan that QR code with the camera of your smartphone, that'll take you to that page on our website, and I'm sure it'll be shared after this too. But there's a lot of great resources on there for native landscape development for or in HOAs, links to the Native Plant Society HOA resources. And then something else we've been working on recently is some example landscape plans. So we've actually worked with Markham Holman Incorporated to do some formal designs based on just your average kind of HOA house in central Indiana. So we've developed these plans that you can see kind of the basic one there, and then the rendering of it that has some different planting options for different landscape beds around a house, and also out front in the hell strip or by the mailbox. So they are not 100% done yet, but they're done enough that I felt comfortable sharing them with you tonight. So you'll see if you go to that page on our website where this information is, it says under construction, but it's enough definitely to look at and get started. We also have landscape plans for those HOA entrance areas. So there's one for a median planting and then one for a signage that's on like a side of the road. So we're hoping that people will be able to use those resources and take them to their HOA if necessary, to show what's possible, show what it could look like, have a really nice formal plan that was developed by a professional to help kind of calm some fears that people might have to move some of these things forward. So yeah, that's all I have for tonight. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those, and wish all of you the best of luck to try to start using natives in your landscape.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was such great information. I learned a lot from that short presentation, and I'm really excited also about the designs that you just spoke about. I think that's going to be so helpful for a lot of people that are looking to get into this and not really sure where to start, or maybe not wanting to spend their energy on the design part and just want the native plants there. So that is really great. Hamilton County does a lot of great work with their soil and water conservation districts. So we are thankful for that. Thank you so much. So next, we're actually going to have two speakers, but our next speaker is Brooke Alford. And after Brooke's presentation, Liz Mazur will also be giving a brief presentation. So I'll go ahead and introduce both of them. Brooke Alford is an urban ag and natural resource educator for Purdue Extension in Marion County. She works with growers, residents, and communities around growing food and green infrastructure in Indianapolis. She is also chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Committee for the Indiana Native Plant Society. The collaboration between Extension and INPS allows resilient programming with community growers in underserved communities, with a focus on providing native pollinator plant programming, supporting community and school gardens. And then Liz Mazur, who will be after Brooke. She's a recently elected member of the City of Lawrence Common Council, where her focus is on sustainability. She also serves on her Homeowners Association board, so she has experience with that. And in both positions, she strives to encourage others to join in her in thinking globally and acting locally. So we will start off with Brooke, who is going to speak about the city ordinances. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for having me. And thank you, Claire, for some really great information. Hamilton County Soil and Water is really doing great things in this area. Before I start sharing my screen, I wanted to let folks know I am here wearing a couple of hats, that of Purdue Extension as an urban ag and natural resource educator, but also as a collaborator with the Indiana Native Plant Society, which just these collaborations allow all of us organizations to extend our impact by working together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ways to view policy and potential policy change for environmental improvements in policy. But I have to let you know, this is not my area of expertise. I'm speaking more from personal experience. Before moving back to the Midwest, I lived in a city on the south side of Seattle in Western Washington, and I had a personal journey of getting involved in environmental advocacy. My personal journey started with a site in the city, Tukwila, that I lived in. that was very important in terms of Indigenous tribal history, and as well as a very unique environmental site as well. It was rocky bald and had just a lot of amazing things going on. And as I became engaged in stewarding this site and trying to help preserve it with a team of other volunteers and nonprofits, I ended up joining the Parks Commission, where I was able to be a voice for native plants, urban forestry, river shoreline preservation. We had a major river going through our community. And from there, I went on to join the Planning Commission for the city of Tukwila that I worked on for about 8 years. And I really grew and learned a lot. So I'm just going to share a little bit of an overview of what I perceived through my experience of being opportunities for change in policy around native plants, invasive plants, managing our environment for a better future. Give me just one moment while I pull up my presentation. Okay, so you've already heard about me and who I am. In terms of Purdue Extension, we deliver practical research-based information that transforms lives and livelihoods. I joined the team about 5 years ago after moving back to this region, and have really appreciated the ability to take research-based information, a lot of research from our campuses, and bring it to our communities in meaningful ways. If you aren't familiar, these are 4 program areas. I collaborate a lot with the different areas in my office and in the state. And then this is Indiana Native Plant Society. I think you've already heard from some representatives here if you were at previous presentations, but they promote appreciation, preservation, scientific study, and use of plants native to Indiana. And they envision an Indiana whose citizens treasure and protect their native plants and the web of life that relies on them, and who use native plants in public and private landscapes. And I would like to also underscore that this vision is for all citizens of Indiana across the spectrum of demographics, regional localities, and such. So affecting policy change for the environment, I'm going to start with engagement, and that really touches on what I shared of my personal experience. I was talking to Dawn Slack of the SICM organization, and she works with the SISMAs. Hamilton Invasive Partnership is one of those. And she was telling me when we were talking about this topic that when they get new members, one of the first things in their communication with them is get engaged. Go to a city or county council meeting, and they really recommend taking a friend because it's good to have your people with you. But by getting engaged, you're starting to learn about what is going on in your city or county, in your community, who are your leaders, and what are the elements of the policy that drives what happens in your city or county. Understanding the different elements of your governing documents, your ordinances, your zoning, that sort of thing, is a way to understand this environment better. And a good way also to do that is by getting to know your planning department. I think planners often really appreciate having engagement with the public, and starting by just asking questions, asking questions, what does my zoning allow or disallow? What are we doing to stop the spread of invasive plants in our communities? How are we supporting native vegetation? How are we protecting our environment from stormwater runoff that's going to potentially damage our waterways? So here are some main policy elements, though not all, that might be engaged with in this topic. A comprehensive plan, if you're not familiar with it, it's the foundational document for long-term planning in a city or county. It's a map or a vision of land use, in a city or county. It's an agreed vision by stakeholders, and stakeholders might be elected officials, they might be business owners, residents, nonprofit organizations, should be representative of all stakeholders in a community. And it communicates within the community and among leadership, but also to potential developers, businesses, organizations that might be interested in moving in as to what the priorities of your municipality are. It can also be a great tool for grant writing. If a municipality in their comprehensive plan, if they identify green stormwater infrastructure as an important tool to protect the environment, and somebody is trying to garner funds to implement green stormwater infrastructure, being able to point to a comprehensive plan and saying, this is a priority of this city or this county, and this is how we will help uplift and achieve that priority. So a comprehensive plan is really good to understand, and understand that they also have to be updated every so often. I think it's normally 7 to 10 years. In my experience in Western Washington, we were mandated every 7 years to update our comprehensive plan. And I did have the opportunity over the years to be part of updating different elements of that plan. And then moving on to ordinances, couple examples would be a weed ordinance or a tree ordinance. We think of the weed ordinance of saying, no non-ornamental vegetation, I don't know the specific wording, can grow, grasses, weeds, or whatever over 8 or 12 inches or something like that. And I think Liz is going to talk about how to engage in using these ordinances. I know Bloomington used a weed ordinance lately to say that any weed over 8 inches tall was unlawful, or whatever the language is. But in that category, they specifically included all listed invasive species. And that's really important before we can protect and expand our native landscapes. We really have to pull in the invasive plants that are really taking over our green spaces. And if you were not familiar with the Indiana terrestrial plant rule, Indiana terrestrial plant rule, I recommend you looking that up. It's a list of highly invasive plants that are now illegal to propagate, sell, or transport over the state line in Indiana. Unfortunately, Callery pear and burning bush are not currently on that. And I know the Indiana Native Plant Society is working to get it updated with 12 new species, including Callery pear and burning bush. So really being able to manage and slow the spread of invasive plants is key to growing our native plant communities and protecting them. Tree ordinance is something that I think many municipalities have. I'm not sure about in Indiana as of yet, but I know when I was on the planning commission in the city of Tukwila, they were developing a tree ordinance, and were able to use a grad student at the University of Washington to review 3 other cities of similar size and capacity to get good samples of what a tree ordinances might be. And these are opportunities to protect urban canopy that's so important in adapting to climate change. And it's also a opportunity to encourage native trees as well. And then development standards. I'm going to go ahead and start moving through these slides because I've already talked about these. Again, ordinances are these laws enacted by local government and by governments, such as zoning ordinances, tree ordinances, like we talked about, weed ordinances. Together, ordinance might be referred to as city code or municipal code. And then development standards. These are standards that are used to guide new developments in a municipality. On the EPA website, a few of the examples are form-based code, which really talks about kind of the form of the built environment that comes in. Transit-oriented development, hopefully many of you have heard about this. It's where you really, you encourage more dense development in areas that are tied within mass transit and within the city. So think maybe Broad Ripple on the, I think that's the red line, where you've seen some of the more dense development go in. And then design guidelines. Design guidelines are used with new development in terms of what is permitted. It could be height, how many stories you can go. You might also have to have a certain number of parking spaces for whatever your use and capacity is. It might have landscaping guidelines and that sort of thing. So these are just some of the basic elements, but really important elements of policy in a city or a county. This is something Thrive Indianapolis was developed right prior to my arriving here. And it's the first sustainability and resiliency action plan for Indy. And it brought together city departments, county agencies, community partners, and residents to chart this course for Indianapolis for a more equitable, healthy, and prepared for the challenges of the 21st century. And climate, again, is a big part of this. Also in Indianapolis, and of course, I am coming from working in Marion County, and so I'm more versed on what's there. But I do not think these things are limited to Indianapolis, and I really encourage you, wherever you are in the state, to find out what you have in your city and your county in terms of stewarding the lands. So within our Public Works Department, we have here in Indy the Office of Land Stewardship, who protects, manages natural habitats for people, wildlife, clean air, and clean water. And so they're a resource as well to tap into when looking for ways to preserve the lands. Green factor is something I wanted to bring up in terms of design guidelines just quickly, because it really was an eye-opener for me in terms of design guidelines and what could be the power in design guidelines. This is based in Seattle, but Seattle adapted it from where it originally was implemented was in somewhere in Germany. So the Seattle Green Factor, so it's a score-based code. So when a developer is trying to implement a new development, they're meeting a certain score. So through this, there are opportunities to increase the amount of and improve the quality of landscaping and new development. Of course, we know landscaping plays an important role in how new development looks and functions. And here are some of the things that they, within the Green Factor in Seattle, are articulated. So improving the look and feel of a neighborhood, reducing stormwater runoff, cooling cities during heat waves, and as we just get warmer in general, providing habitat for birds and insects, and supporting adjacent businesses and decreasing crime. So a new development is going to be scored in different ways in which they might attain these. And again, I'm not an expert on this, but it is to me, it was an interesting lens to look at. So one of the interesting, let's see, did I have some? Okay, yeah, I did have another slide on that. So you have to reach a minimum score established by the zoning of your property, and you can choose from a menu of landscape credits for various features, including, but not limited to, green roofs, rain gardens, vegetated walls, trees, and shrubs. You can receive bonus credits if you plant along the sidewalk, if you use native plants, or if you create a food garden. And how I understood it also is sometimes developers might use this as kind of a compromise or a way to get a variance. Say they want to go up one more story than is allowed in a certain zoning area. They could potentially get a variance to take another story in this denser area if they add more green stormwater infrastructure or increase the urban canopy on their sites. I think also they've been able to reduce parking spaces at times by doing some of these things. Of course, having to meet the criteria that's still going to serve the neighborhood at the same time. So this is one, it's a tool that I've seen implemented. It was created by some professional landscape architects and engineers, and has some pretty hardy equations in there to just to inspire greener development, to really encourage it through incentivization. And I think that that's what we want to look for often in meeting developments where they're at, is how can we incentivize these kind of projects. I told you I am not an expert. I'm speaking more from my personal experience here tonight. But at Purdue Extension, we do have people, we do have professionals and specialists with more expertise. If you were to Google, the link was way too long for me to fit on here, and I don't have a QR code. But if you Google land use Purdue Extension, you'll find there's an American Citizen Planner, Indiana. It's a program. It's a well-developed training, and it's for people who are in planning, serve on planning commissions, residents who are just interested. Maybe they would like to participate on a planning commission in the future, but to really understand planning better, the different elements, resources, and strategies you can become part of to be part of better planning. There's also the Indiana Citizen Planner Guide. This is a free downloadable PDF. You can also purchase, I think, a hard copy if you want, and it's a great resource as well to better understand planning and how to advocate for healthier planning. Also, if you Google community planning Purdue Extension, you'll find some more programs available. One of those programs is a rainscaping education program. This is a 2-day program, 8 hours each day, and it talks about rainscaping or green stormwater infrastructure, which basically is how can you treat stormwater naturally on your site, where stormwater naturally percolates on site for the most part and does not get sent to our stormwater system, our stormwater system, where it might create erosion on our waterways. It might take pollution off of our street surfaces and that sort of thing. I'll be offering that in Marion County this year, June 13th and 14th. That's a Thursday and a Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It kind of is the why and the how of creating this. We talk about going to specifics of designing rain gardens and the native plantings that go along with them, as well as how to maintain them. And at the end of the day on Friday, we'll spend a few hours planting a new rain garden at the local Oaks Academy elementary school here in Indy. And that QR code will get you to that to tell you a little bit more about that program if you're interested. And that's all I have tonight. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Here is my contact information. And I am going to stop sharing now. That was just kind of a brief overview of my experience and this kind of advocacy. And there are many ways to go about it, but the more engaged and the more knowledge you can gain, the more impactful you can be. So are we, Jenny, going to be moving on to Q&A now? I haven't been watching the chats.
That's okay. Actually, we are going to be good. Liz is going to do her
Liz is
presentation.
going
So
to.
yeah, so I'll start sharing my screen for that, and we'll get that going. And she'll just do that for a couple minutes. Let's see here. Okay. How's that? It's looking okay with that. Let's see. I'll go ahead and mute and we'll get, well, not on there yet. There we go. All right.
Hi, I'm Liz Mazur, and thank you again, Claire and Brooke. Just fascinating and useful and inspirational. Thank you so much. So I'm going to be very specific and talk about the community where I live. the city of Lawrence, and we have a weeds and rank vegetation ordinance, Title 3, Article 3, Chapter 3, Section 1. And you know what? The ordinance is uh, excellent. It's got everything you need in it pretty much, but it's just not always being enforced. So, what I would encourage people to do is to talk to your city officials, talk to the Department of Public Works, and encourage them to be looking at their ordinance and start enforcing it. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so you know what? We're going to skip over this because we're out of time, but this is just like we want to be okay, so this is the specific ordinance. It states that weeds or other vegetation that exceeds a height of 8 inches measured from the ground are not permitted, and that Purdue University is the reference technical authority for the Department of Public Works with respect to noxious weeds in the ordinance. So here we have this ordinance that says you shouldn't have weeds or vegetation that's above 8 inches. But if you want to have natives in your yard, you can do as Claire suggested, make it clear that you have these natives in your yard and get a sign. And you can go to the City of Indianapolis plant registry or the other signs that Claire pointed out and talk to in Lawrence, you can talk to the Department of Public Works. You can talk to Renee Raffaella. And if they know that you're not just letting your yard go because you don't care anything, they will support that. And I do want to make clear that it says Purdue University is the reference technical authority for the Department of Public Works. And so someone like Brooke, we can pull in and use her expertise, and she can perhaps give a review to the city employees and people on their HOAs about what are best practices currently, which people may not know, but Purdue Extension knows, like how important it is to have buffer zones around a detention pond. So most of the time you have the ordinances and they are very effective, but they have to be looked at and enforced. And a lot of that has to do with enforcing that invasives such as honeysuckle most of them are above 8 inches. So many of us are guilty of having these invasives on our property that we should be removing and focusing on planting native plants. Next slide, please. And this is an example in my neighborhood, Kensington Farms. Remember, Claire was talking about how much it costs to mow grass. Well, there's certain things that can be done, and we will have a sign. It just needs to be posted where that grass is higher. This is a low mow area in Kensington Farms, and going to work on getting those areas in the city of Lawrence too. And that's saving money and reducing pollution by not mowing all this grass. And the neighbors were talked to about this. They were advised that this would be going on. They were very skeptical, and most of them are pleased with it and happy to be saving money and to be providing habitat for animals in the area and the chain of life, the way it works. Next slide, please. We're going to skip on to, we just want to get, sorry. This is, I think everyone knows about this, about how native plants are so good when it comes to reducing flooding because they absorb the rainwater. Next slide, please. And as part of that ordinance that we already mentioned, we can be getting rid of plants such as Japanese barberry, which is a health hazard. It hosts tick populations. Enforce the ordinance so these can be dealt with. So, and I think there's just one more slide, and then it's time for, yeah, we already talked about the City of Indianapolis Plant Registry and how you can go to the website Native Plants at indy.gov, and they will help you. And so can Claire and Brooke and myself and lots of other people figure out how you can have natives in your yard and be supported by the Department of Public Works and your city. And we can all be working together on that and using the ordinances that are on the books to benefit us all, to benefit native plants and beautify our areas. And that's pretty much what I just want to say that let's look at the ordinances we have and enforce them. And a lot of times that will make a big difference. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz, so much for that. And I apologize, there was some kind of delay on the sharing of or going through the slides. I apologize for that. Let's see here. Okay, so questions and answers. I think that we've had a lot of great questions in our question box. I think most of them have been answered. If the panelists want to put their videos on and unmute, just in case we have any in the final minutes, please feel free. We still have time to, if you want to enter any questions into the Q&A that have not been answered yet, we'd be happy to get those answered for you. In the meantime, I did want to point out just a couple of the great comments that we got from Rachel Stanger at DNR. She had mentioned, and hopefully you've seen this already, but in case you didn't, that she was saying that most cities in Indiana have tree ordinances, and one way to have a say in what goes into the ordinance is to join your city's tree board. So they can be the same or the different from the park board, but they're just a group that promotes and advocates for trees and native trees in a city. So she was also generous enough to offer her email there and help out if anybody has any questions with that. So please feel free to reach out to her. I think that was really great of her to do. And then another mention from Ed Ramtham was SICM, which is a state of Indiana cooperative for invasives management. And if you don't have one of these groups in your county yet in Indiana, you hopefully will soon, or you can also contact them about maybe getting one set up. I live in Boone County, and we recently got one going about a year ago, and we're going to be doing a lot of great work, really working on removing invasives in all counties in Indiana. That is their goal, is to have those in every county. So they do surveys to help identify the extent of infestation of invasive plants on properties. So there's a website listed there, but we would definitely recommend SICM. Let's see here if we have any other questions for Liz. How many people take advantage of native plants in the city of Lawrence is one of the questions.
How many people? Well, in our neighborhood, we have at least 8 families that have started growing milkweed in their yards and other nectar flowers to help with monarchs when they're there and attract other pollinators. The city of Lawrence has, in the past 3 years, planted almost 5 acres of native pollinator-friendly prairie area. And so lots of people like to go check that out and enjoy seeing how gorgeous pollinators are and the insects that are attracted to them. But the more you start talking to people and encouraging people and telling them that they can save money by having pollinators and reducing their turf grass, it's starting to grow here in Lawrence. It's becoming the thing to do. We're starting a trend.
That's fantastic. That's great. And I think Lawrence is very lucky to have you on their common council, somebody who's going to be advocating from within. So, all right. One other question. What if you don't live in Indianapolis? Stacy says she lives in Plainfield, and how does she find certification? I'm I'm not quite sure what's the certification you're referring to, Stacy, unless it's one of the panelists knows what.
If you're talking about native plant certification, I believe you go to the Indiana Native Plant Society or the Indiana Wildlife Federation. Is that right, Claire? In terms of getting the signage for it.
Yeah, sorry. Buy Indiana Natives, Grow Indiana Natives.org. Maybe both of them. But yeah, you can get that great sign and certification through the Indiana Native Plant Society.
And then if you want to know more things specifically about Plainfield and their programs, I would probably start with your planning department. Let them know that you're interested in what resources, programs, or policies are in place in the city of Plainfield.
Excellent, excellent. And looks like we'll just go take this one other question. Just because it's a common one, it's not exactly what we're talking about, but it does have to do with HOAs. And I think probably everybody on this call is dealing with this or will be dealing with this if they haven't already. And so anyway, Amanda is saying our HOA's common area has a ton of honeysuckle. The neighbors usually chip in to do some maintenance work rather than hire it out. Our limiting factor is what to do with all the honeysuckle we cut down. Any tips on how to get rid of them? Responsibility. Again, a little bit off topic, but definitely something that everybody will be dealing with. And Claire, I would you like to answer that live? That would be great if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. I started to type out the question of whether or not you were treating the cut stumps. So making sure you're doing the most effective management strategy is gonna help reduce volume, ideally over time, right? So I'll post a link to like a resource on cut stump treatment where you apply herbicide right to the cut stump right after you cut it. But as far as debris, that's really tough, especially in HOAs. You know, sometimes like we have Green Cycle in Hamilton County where we have some HOAs that will like physically transport their debris to have it like composted or disposed of, but that's a really big challenge. Some communities will pick up, like in Noblesville, again in Hamilton County, they will do like roadside pickup of lawn waste. If there are places where you can just create brush piles, they're really great for habitat. That's not always what people in HOAs want to look at. But again, that could be another opportunity for education and to kind of shift that perception of what's acceptable because they're really great for wildlife. Chipping is another great option. If you can, you know, partner with a tree company to come in and chip and like have somewhere you can spread that, or they could haul away the chip debris. Or we even have some HOAs that are involved with our SISMA that rent a small chipper for their work days. So those are options.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mulch.
Sorry, Liz, was that Liz or Brooke?
I was just saying it's a great source of mulch as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Very good. I think that gets to most of the questions. I would like to remind everyone to please take just a minute to fill out the survey if you haven't already, or if you, once you hang up, to please do that. It really does help HEC with our future webinars to kind of know what everybody wants and what we're doing well, what we you know, could work on. So I wanted to thank you again for attending tonight. I want to thank all of the panelists. It was so much great information, and I hope that everybody else got a lot of information from it and are inspired to go out and make a change in your community. We encourage you to reach out to HEC or any of the individual panelists or to the Indiana Native Plant Society if you have further questions about this topic. Please keep an eye out for after a few days for an email from us that will have a link to the recording of this session that you can share with anybody you'd like. We'll have links to the presenter's slides and some follow-up information as well. So thank you again to everyone, and have a great evening. Get out there and go make some changes in your HOAs and your towns. Thanks again.